Well, it is 1:02. We do have a quorum. If no one has any objections, we will go ahead and call for the roll, and hopefully within the next minute or so, Commissioner Myrtle and Commissioner Liberty will sign on. Lily, would you please call for the roll?
Of course. Commissioner Allman?
I'm here.
Commissioner Angelo?
Here, but I have a family emergency and I will not be in the full meeting, but I'm here right now. Thank you.
Commissioner Barish?
Here.
Commissioner Diamond?
I'm here.
Commissioner Myrtle? I don't think he's on yet. Commissioner Miller?
Here.
Commissioner Liberty? Commissioner Rich?
Here.
Commissioner Riley?
I'm here.
Commissioner Weir?
I'm here.
And Chair Moschetti.
Present, thank you.
And I think Mark just logged.
There's Mark.
I'm here.
Great, thank you, Mark. Okay, is there any public expression on any non-agenda items, please? Lily?
Allman has one.
Yes, sir.
This isn't the first time this has happened where people, committee members have submitted agenda items that are not on our agenda. And this is not something we can talk about today because it's not on our agenda. But I certainly, I've been in government long enough to where I can see when an uncomfortable item comes up that sometimes the agenda item disappears and it's not talked about. And this is not something that this committee by any stretch would support. And I'm just letting people know I'm going to put it on the agenda next month that when any member of this committee puts something on the agenda, submits an agenda summary request, unless that person has withdrawn that agenda, I believe we have every right to have that on the agenda for that meeting. And this is public expression. I'm just voicing my opinion. I know that there was a change in the personnel for Measure B this last 4 weeks, and we are not going to talk about personnel. This is the situation where if the newspaper was correct and stated the position was eliminated, then I think that we are owed some kind of reason why the position was eliminated, because we as a committee voted to have a project manager. But if that's not the reason, then certainly we can't talk about it. And I just want to voice my frustration over agenda item summaries that are put in and they are either ignored or purposely taken off the agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Allman. Any other public expression?
Yes, we have Sherry.
Sherry, please.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to talk about the Crisis Stabilization Unit, which I haven't heard any discussion about this in quite a few meetings. And the Kemper Report talks about the CSU in its report. It gives us some detail about 3 small counties that recently opened them: Nevada County, Napa County, San Luis Obispo County. Talks about their revenue shortfalls to operate them. Talks about how they're set up, whether they're part of the hospital emergency department or self-standing. It gives the pros and cons of the CSU, and it gives a recommendation. And the recommendation is that a CSU should be established in Mendocino County. And annual operating revenue to support the CSU should be allocated from Measure B funds. They also recommend it being placed in the context of the Crisis Residential Treatment Facility, but that's not like mandatory. They look at an alternative to a CSU where they embed crisis clinicians in hospital emergency departments, but they don't recommend that for this county. So I just wanted to see, bring this up to see if this is still a topic of discussion. There's a lot more that the Kemper Report talks about than what I just mentioned here. So that's all. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Sherry. Any other further community comment?
No, it doesn't look like it.
Okay, thank you. So we will move on to item 3A, discussion and possible board action regarding appointment of vice chair for the Mental Health Treatment Act Citizens Oversight Committee. Commissioner Diamond.
Thank you, Donna. I think everybody knows I've been on the committee since it began. And in the last cycle, I was appointed to be vice chair of the committee. And this was before COVID-19 hit. And I think we all know and have recognized in our own lives and the lives of people we know, COVID has changed everything everywhere, all over the world. And for me, it's increased my work. I already had a full-time job when I joined the committee. And some of you know I've been a mental health professional for more than 50 years. But I've also, some of you may not know that I have a doctorate degree in international health, and some of my research and part of my doctoral studies were in infectious disease and pandemics. And so I've been really called on both by local people, nationally and internationally, to be available to talk about both the physical and mental health aspects of everybody's lives since COVID. So as a result, I have not been able to be as involved and effective as a vice chair as I would like to be. And so reluctantly, I'm going to need to step down just because of doing all of new work in addition to my other work. And I also, as some of you know, I have a fairly large family. I'm married. I have 5 children, 17 grandchildren, and one beautiful great granddaughter who everybody has more challenges. So I'm just doing really more than I can. And reluctantly, I'm going to need to step down. And there's a number of people that I'm sure could step in. From my perspective, I think Dr. Janine Miller would be somebody I think would be the right person to step into my spot. But for now, I want to thank you, Donna, for being able to serve as your vice chair. And I hope to continue to be supportive to the whole committee. But for now, I need to respectfully step down from the position. Thanks. That's really all I needed to say.
Thank you, Commissioner Diamond, for your service and for staying on the committee. And I appreciate your comments. Thank you very much. Committee input, please. Do I have none? Community comment, please. Lily, do we have any?
Nope.
Commissioner Diamond, would you like to make a recommendation?
Well, just what I had said, I would recommend, if it's possible, to have Dr. Janine Miller step into the position. I'm not exactly sure the procedure for that, but that would be my recommendation.
Do I have a second on that?
I second.
Thank you, Dr. Barish. Dr. Miller, are you willing to accept the position?
Yeah, I can do that.
Any further committee comment, please? Hearing none, Lily, would you please call for a vote?
Commissioner Allman?
Hold on a second. I couldn't get my
Sorry, Mark.
microphone unmuted.
That's okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just a little worried about the director of the behavioral health committee being the vice chair of the Measure B committee. Is there any type of conflict in that, as one could reward the other? Maybe this is a question for our attorney, but it doesn't feel like just like me bidding the CRT. There could be seen as a potential conflict in that, and I chose not to. So
Certainly. Thank you, Commissioner Myrtle.
And Almond shares the exact same concerns. Thank you, Mark.
Okay, and County Council, would you mind commenting on that, please?
Sure. So from a legal perspective, I don't know that I would see any issues in terms of potential conflicts. Generally the conflicts arise when you have either a personal financial interest or you have an interest of, say, a company or entity. Here, we're talking about a county body, county funds. I don't believe that would trigger any of the legal requirements on any sort of conflict of interest provisions. I believe that the sheriff's, for example, if the sheriff's office or the behavioral health or one of the other ones that's appointed to the committee, I believe they can legitimately have a role in terms of serving on the advisory function. The one thing that I would suggest staying away from a potential conflict standpoint would be having any sort of staff or direct involvement in any of audits, et cetera, that are conducted on the use of funds by the same department that's doing that. And that's not because of conflict of interest rules. That really has to do with sort of best accounting practices and the requirement that audits be independent. If you got any other questions on that, I'm happy to answer.
Committee, do we have any further questions for our County Council? Yes, Commissioner Riley.
Thank you. I would just like to ask Dr. Miller if she feels any conflict between serving on the Behavioral Health Advisory Board, which has been making recommendations to this committee, and anything else. Janine, I know you probably weren't volunteering for this appointment right now. Do you have any thoughts about the perceived conflicts here?
So I don't, Shannon, I actually don't serve on the Behavioral Health Advisory Board. I'm a liaison, so I provide them support. My staff provides support, and we're there to answer questions and provide update regarding mental health services and substance use services throughout the county, but I'm not a voting member and I'm not a city member. I'm just a liaison for that committee.
Any further comment? Okay. Lily, if you could please call for a vote.
Commissioner Allman?
No.
Commissioner Angelo?
Yes.
Commissioner Barish?
Yes.
Commissioner Diamond?
Yes.
Commissioner Myrtle?
No.
Commissioner Miller?
I'm not sure I should vote. Should I? I mean, yes, but it seems weird to vote yes, so maybe.
And I think Commissioner Liberty is now on.
I'm on, but I didn't hear enough of the arguments to respond.
Commissioner Rich?
Yes.
Commissioner Riley?
No.
Commissioner Weir?
Yes.
And Chair Moschetti.
Yes. Okay, thank you, everyone. We will move on to item B, approval of the minutes from our January 27th, 2021 meeting. Do I have any corrections or any comment on the minutes, please? Yes, Commissioner Riley.
I would just like to point out that we've had this conversation a whole bunch of times and we agreed to go to action minutes, and here we are looking at summary minutes again.
We went to actually whatever the clerk wanted to do. So, I'm fine with summary minutes. I'm fine with action minutes. But we never really made a decision. We moved on to we've always left it to where the clerk made their own decisions. So I hear what you're saying.
My recollection is that there was direction from the committee. Regardless, I'm kind of tired of that argument. So I have reviewed the minutes and I move approval.
Perfect. Thank you, Commissioner Riley. Do I have a second?
I second.
Thank you. Do I have any further committee comment, please? Do I have any community comment, please?
No community comment.
Thank you, Lily. Will you call for the vote?
Commissioner Allman,
Aye.
Commissioner Angela, Commissioner,
Yes, sorry, yes.
Commissioner Barish,
Yes.
Commissioner Diamond,
Yes.
Commissioner Myrtle,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller,
Yes.
Commissioner Liberty,
Yes.
Commissioner Rich,
Yes.
Commissioner Riley,
Yes.
Commissioner Weir,
Yes.
and Chair Muscati.
Yes. Thank you. Moving on to item 3C, the February 2021 Measure B financial report. Commissioner Miller, please.
So I'm going to hand this over. Andrea Turchin has taken over doing the financials for Measure B at this time. As you know, Lloyd was filling in a little bit and had asked that those get transferred over. And so these are the reports that Andrea has put together to date for you guys. She's willing to provide, get any feedback if there's more you want to see, more detail if there's missing anything. But Andy is here and can go ahead and talk on those reports.
Hello, I'm Andrea Turchin. I guess if any questions, I kind of took Lloyd's and reports and kind of broke them out. So the first one is just kind of a summary of the revenue and expenses year to date. And let's see here. The second one is just 2020's revenues that we've gotten in, whatever deposits that have come in to date. And then the third page is, we have kind of they're not two different budgets, but they're broken up. So we have our operations expenses, and that's it. And it's by line and by our org or our accounts that we did. And then on the bottom of that page, it's what we budgeted in year to date and what's the remaining of that by line item. And then the next page is our projects accounts, capital facility accounts. And it's the same thing as each project and by line item. So we thought we'd give you a little bit more information by line item, and if you have any questions.
Do we have any committee questions, please?
Or if
Yeah.
there's something else you would like to see. I wasn't sure.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Commissioner Riley, please.
This is a question not so much directly about this report, but about the development of our 21-22 budget, which I've been asking about for several months now. Andrea, are you the staff person who's going to assist Measure B with the development of our budget this year?
For the 21-22, I would, yes, assume I'd probably be working with Lloyd or help you
Okay,
with that.
yeah. It's February, so I would have expected to see it on our agenda by now. So I'd like to request that that be on next month's agenda, please.
Thank you, Commissioner Riley. I have written that down. Thank you. Any other further questions from the committee, please? Anything else you'd like to see, et cetera? Yeah, yes, Commissioner Riley.
I believe we also asked for a little more detail about the staff who are being paid from Measure B funds. And I'm not seeing that on these particular reports. Is that something that we can expect to see in the future?
So the staff on the 4052 expense report right now, on the top is just whatever staff. So it'd be like Allison's staff or any project manager. And then any permanent staff that is hired through that budget. That's on the top. It doesn't have a name, but that's where their salary goes. And then any staff that is billing to Measure B, so like Lily's time, if she bills time studies to Measure B, that's in the special department expense line item. That's where that staff salary is. If they're coming from a different department, or if their payroll is in a different department, that's where it gets transferred, is in that line item.
Okay, my recollection, and maybe other committee members can chime in if I'm off base here, but was that we were looking for a little more detail about which staff were being paid, specifically which staff, that the amount and which staff were being paid out of Measure B funds. I'm not sure if anyone else can help me out here. I'm kind of looking through the past minutes again.
So on here, the staff, your permanent staff is on top would be Allison. That's her salary. And then the other staff members that have been paid out are, well, it was your staff assistant when Kayla Miles was there, or Lily has been charging there. But we can make it more
transparent would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, that's my recollection as well.
Thank you, Mark.
So
This is Groundhog's Day, because we've talked about the agenda summary or the minutes. I'm sorry, the minute summary, and now we're talking about the same thing, and we're using our time up to talk about issues that we talk about every meeting. And if we're going to do this, we need to make them regular agenda items. I would just as soon move on. And if we're going to be billed for, $3,000, $4,000 out of behavioral health, then so be it. We don't have to have the name of the person. We owe it to the citizens of where the money's going, and the goal that we have of improving the quality of life of victims of mental health in this county have to be built upon how we're spending the money, and transparency is the only way to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Allman. Commissioner Rich, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I was understanding this clearly. So the top part, it doesn't have a name, and that's the part we would like to have additional clarification on. But any of the other non-regular staff who spend time or bill time to this are all listed under the special department expense, and those are noted by staff person who are billing?
Correct.
Okay. I just also want to comment that I do.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Michelle.
I do appreciate the budget summary at the bottom. I think that's really helpful in addition to the detail at the top.
I have a question.
Commissioner Liberty, go ahead.
All right, thanks. So what I want to thank Christian for diluting my ignorance last week on the topic of employees. So I think it's important while we're talking about this budget stuff that we understand that we can make a recommendation to create a position, but once that position is created, we have no say on what the commission, that position is charged with doing. And so potentially, maybe we should look, now that we are going to know exactly what we're spending on this, maybe we should also look at alternative methods of doing that. Maybe we should look at, and be an agenda item for another day, but look at a contract employee like a 1099 employee, so that employee could serve at the wishes of this committee as opposed to the wishes of an entity that we're supposed to be judging or we're supposed to be funding. So anyways, just when we're looking at this, I think we need to keep that possibility in mind, because otherwise we just make sure we understand we're asking to spend this money and no say over how it's managed. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Liberty. Any further committee comment, please? Is there any community comment, Lily?
Yes, Sherry.
Yes, Sherry, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you. So I just have some questions from this report. The first one relates to the very first section, which I understand is or was Allison's salary. And in general, by month, most of the numbers are fairly close to each other, except for this last month, which is about $2,500 more. And I wondered why there was that increase. I understand, not receiving the, minutia of what that person does, but when there's a significant variance between one month and another, I think that should be explained. So maybe that could be part of the agenda item if this does become agendaized. The next piece is I understand the special department expense are for other staff. I see Sonoma Sweepers is charged out of those. And it says Measure B, previous RV, Redwood Valley, I guess the training center. I'm wondering why that's in there and why it wasn't charged to the behavioral training center. And then the last one is on the final page where it gets into the 3 facilities so far, the CRT. There's a charge from Nocton Lewis for the second line there, $108,083 and change. And it says Nocton Lewis PHF, the PUF unit, 1922. So I'm wondering why the $108,000 was charged to the CRT when it had to do with the PUF. So this is minutia, but it's for purposes of accuracy. If you're going to set up a budget and try to, ascertain where you are, things have to be charged correctly. That to me is the reason for looking at things closely. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. Any other further community comment, please? Any more committee comment? Thank you, Andy, for giving that report.
You're welcome. I'll work on the staff part, so I'll have a summary down at the end for you guys.
Okay, great. Thank you. Item 3D, discussion and possible action regarding prioritization of development and adoption of a strategic plan, creation of an ad hoc committee to discuss restructure of the Measure B Oversight Committee. Commissioner Riley, please.
Thank you. Let me unmute myself. This is kind of a 2-part item. And again, as Member Allman stated, feels a little bit Groundhog Day-ish. But we are, obviously more than 2 years into the implementation of Measure B. We regularly discuss our struggles to articulate the work that we've done or to demonstrate how it was prioritized. And it feels to a lot of folks, I think, that we're squandering this very valuable resource that we have in this very generous sales tax revenue from our community, excuse me. So in 2018, we commissioned what we refer to as the Kemper Report. By most accounts, this was a highly regarded analysis of our existing system. There was very little dispute, as far as I can tell, regarding the prioritization or the recommendation of the various facilities and projects that should be undertaken with these funds. And yet, despite repeated conversations about it, it was never developed into a strategic plan. Instead, we formed a committee, an ad hoc committee, the Kemper Ad Hoc Committee, and they did some further analysis of it. They made some additional recommendations, and our understanding was that a strategic plan was being developed within that committee. However, in May of last year, this committee was informed that it was not actually within the scope of the Kemper Ad Hoc Committee to develop a plan. So we modified the scope so that work could be accomplished. But then by August, we still didn't have a strategic plan. And then the committee was informed that we didn't have the financial expertise or resources to complete that component of the strategic plan. So we moved and approved the hiring of a financial expert so that could then be accomplished. At that same meeting, supervisors from the Board of Supervisors were present. I think they've very publicly been asking for what they call a financial plan associated with Measure B. We had discussion at that meeting that yes, a financial plan is necessary. It is a necessary component of the strategic plan. And so again, we talked about the prioritization of that plan along with its financial plan. And here we are in February of 2021, and we're no closer to having a plan, it feels like, than we were 3 years ago. We're also being blasted at the Board of Supervisors meeting for being all over the place. That's a quote, saying that we do not have a common mission here on this committee. And it's not for a lack of will. I think I might disagree with the reasons about how we got here, but I think few would dispute the fact that the current structure isn't working the way we wanted it to. We envisioned that this committee would prioritize these projects, direct this work, make recommendations to the Board of Supervisors. But instead, in the absence of a strategic plan, what's happening is that we're receiving input directly from the Board of Supervisors, from the Behavioral Health Advisory Board, from members of the community. And then, as evidenced already in this meeting, when our committee does ask for things, there's often a lack of follow through. We've not had a dedicated staff person, lack of consistency in the agendas, in the minutes, and the items that we ask for often don't come to fruition. And months later, we'll remember them and we'll say, whatever happened to that? And there'll be a promise that it will show up on a future agenda, but it doesn't. So all of that is really just to say that this isn't working. And it's imperative that we do effectively and responsively administer these funds that we've been collecting from our community. I think that cannot be done in a transparent manner if we do not have a strategic plan. So the first part of my recommendation today is that we do whatever it takes to prioritize that work. I think it should be done no later than May of this year. If that work cannot be done by the Kemper Ad Hoc Committee, if that's not the correct place to do it, let's create a place to do it. That work has to happen. And I believe that it should be based largely on the Kemper Report. If we don't have the financial resources to complete that report on our own, we've already provided direction to do that. And again, that needs to be prioritized. Secondary to that, and only secondary to that, because the strategic plan is imperative, I believe we should consider restructuring this committee. as I said, this 11-person committee that is receiving input from all different directions, including above us, is in many ways just slowing the process down now. The work, once the strategic plan is developed, should be carried out by our mental health experts who we have on staff. The county has been in the mental health business for decades now. There is purchasing expertise at the county and direction. Again, the supervisors would be holding them accountable, holding us accountable, holding city staff or county staff, accountable for sticking to that strategic plan. And then the Measure B Oversight Committee would meet less regularly in my proposal. Could be quarterly, could be semi-annually, could just be annually. And the work of the Measure B committee would be to review the independent annual audit, which I'd like to point out has not yet been done to my knowledge. This is called for in the Measure B ordinance, an independent annual audit, and compare the work that has been done according to the strategic plan. And if necessary, we would continue to make recommendations to the Board of Supervisors. But we would not, and I want to be very clear about this, we would not be engaging in conversations about the merits of LED lighting versus incandescent. We would not be talking about landscaping contracts or half of the other stuff that ends up coming to this committee instead of the big picture stuff that we're supposed to be focusing on. Those should be outlined in a strategic plan. So I think the best way to accomplish that would be to form an ad hoc committee that could work closely with the Measure B ad hoc committee on the Board of Supervisors to discuss what a restructure of this committee might look like. I do want to point out that this committee is required based on the Measure B ordinance. Specifically, the Measure B ordinance states that we must create a politically independent Mental Health Treatment Act Citizens Oversight Committee, which shall review the independent annual audit of expenditures and the performance management plan for compliance with the specific purpose of this ordinance. So again, this refers to a specific performance management plan. I read that to be a strategic plan. We can call it a performance management plan. It further says that the committee shall also provide recommendations to the Board of Supervisors on the implementation of this ordinance. And then the committee shall be comprised of 11 members, and it outlines the composition that we currently have today. So my proposal would remain consistent with what is stated in the original ordinance. It's also consistent with the Kemper Report ad hoc committee's recommendation that they made a couple of years ago to create a 10-year financial strategic plan for fiscal analysis as soon as possible. Kemper's financial plan is a good place to start, that committee said. My recommendation does not come easily. Comes with a bit of a heavy heart here. I think this is not the direction that we all thought we'd be in right now. This isn't the place where 3 years in, 5 years in, we thought we would be. Nonetheless, it is not intended to circumvent process or transparency. In fact, it is intended to further accomplish that. So again, my recommendations are A, to prioritize the development of a strategic plan that includes the financial plan, and then B, create an ad hoc committee to discuss the possible restructure of our current committee. So I'd be happy to answer any questions if anyone has them.
Thank you, Commissioner Riley. I just have one for clarification, and that is, I believe it was back in October, I could be wrong on the months. The project manager submitted a strategic plan first draft, and there was a lot of committee feedback on that, requesting more visuals, a definitive order of importance, formatting that includes goals. are we looking to use that as a template, or are you thinking of starting from scratch?
I was pretty clear at that meeting. I think that the most critical thing that document was missing was the plan. It was rather a statement of the work that had been completed so far, with some additional speculation about things that could happen in the future. I do not recommend starting with that document.
Okay, thank you. That was just for clarity.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Other commissioners' comments, please.
Thank you. I absolutely understand where you're coming from, Shannon, because our progress is a good representation of the jokes that people make about government, about spending lots of money and not doing anything. However, the good news is for the voters that, you know, and our budget, our financial plans prove this. The vast majority of money hasn't been spent because we're waiting until we have the right thing to spend it on. So it's not like we're typically just spending money as it comes in. The money is being saved, and we have, you know, huge amounts, even in interest, like 15 grand a month, just in interest. My hesitation with this, and I it's only a slight hesitation, not a lot, is on this committee, there seems to be quite a bit of disagreement over the priorities of what buildings or what services are going to be required. And I personally believe that a PUF unit is the most important thing that this county needs. However, there are people on this very committee, and some of them mental health professionals, that disagree with that. And I would hate to put our trust into government employees and going down the wrong road of what the voters' intent was, because I know what the voters' intent was. I've been involved with this for quite a while. And a PUF unit seems to have fallen off the plate at every time we have a discussion of a service. And so that's my only hesitation. And if somebody said that we're going to do this and a PUF is now the highest priority, then Shannon, I would be a big cheerleader and say this is the right way to go, because the committee doesn't need to get involved when progress is being made. It's just the frustration that I feel, and I believe that most of the committee members feel, we're not making progress. And we're watching good ideas fail, whether it's the crisis van, because it's not up and running yet, but we're getting close. It's not failing. It's the sheriff is doing the training, and we're close to getting it up and running. Whether it's a training center that should have been opened 1.5 years ago, whether it's continuing to squabble over Old Howard Hospital, which would appear to be a decent place to have a PUF unit. So my hesitation is just handing over the reins to someone and saying, all right, we'll check back in a year and see how you guys are doing, because that's not what the voters' intent was. Thank you.
Yeah, Tom, if I may, Donna, I totally understand. But Tom, don't you think that the PUF was prioritized in the Kemper Report?
Oh, I know it was prioritized in the Kemper Report. No question about it. But it's not being prioritized by people on this committee who are professionals in a mental health system. And so I feel like when I bring up the PUF, it's a battle just to keep the conversation going, because there's other very pretty items that people want to build and to partake in, when the basis for a PUF was a whole generational reason to get Measure B on the ballot.
Yes, I agree, Tom. And to be clear, my recommendation is that we develop a strategic plan that is based on the Kemper Report, and that the further work is governed by that plan.
Right. And I'm not going to disagree. It's just,
okay.
You and I have seen these things happen before.
Agreed.
You turn your back, and all of a sudden things are not going as you plan.
I agree.
That's what monthly. Listen, we're having monthly meetings. It could be worse. We could be having meetings twice a month. Okay, but right now we're having monthly meetings. Just to see what we can keep on track.
Thank you, commissioners. Do I have any further commissioner input, please?
Yes, this is Commissioner Rich.
Mm-hmm.
I have several thoughts coming from the perspective of the Behavioral Health Advisory Board. One, I think I'd like to reframe this nothing has happened and we've been squandering taxpayer money idea. Work has been slow and efforts have not been as effective or efficient as perhaps they could be. But the reality is We have a CRT going, which was, if you look at Kemper's recommendations on page 44, was the number one item was to construct a residential treatment facility. 2 was the CSU, which we seem to not be talking about at all. 3 was that inpatient unit. We've also gotten the training facility going. Is it open? We've also had a pandemic in the middle of it. So I think it's unreasonable to expect progress to have been made on a training facility in the middle of a pandemic. We basically lost a year of actual work because of the pandemic, and I think it's important to account for that. Secondly, the Behavioral Health Advisory Board has been specifically asked for recommendations, some of which have been accepted, some of which have not. So I think it is unfair to critique receiving feedback from sources which you specifically requested. And thirdly, I do think it is absolutely critical that we have a strategic plan. The Behavioral Health Advisory Board has been articulating this for many years. And I do think that it's not just the strategic plan part, the what you want to do, it's the work plan piece that goes with it. So a strategic plan without a really good work plan is pretty useless. And from that work plan, you could actually have an actionable document that would require less high-level oversight. But you also then have to have staff who can implement it. And I have to say, I think our behavioral health department staff do absolutely the best work they can with what they have. They are stretched really thin. And I want to support them in their work and not expect that, magically throwing all of this extra stuff to them without providing additional staffing and support just seems really unreasonable. So, I would hate to add to the burnout of staff in this process. So I think that's it for now.
Thank you, Commissioner Rich. Commissioner Diamond, you had your hand up?
I think somebody had their hands up before me.
Sorry, did I miss somebody? I
Well,
apologize.
but I'm not sure of that. I see Ace Barish's hand up. And
My hand was up before.
Okay.
Michelle's.
All right, let's go.
I'll go after those.
Let's go. Mark, Ace, Jed. How's that? Mark, please.
Great. Thank you. I share some of the same concerns that Shannon has mentioned, although we have trekked through a slow and tedious process. We've had some accomplishments. We have prioritized some items, but I do feel that because of the lack of a strategic plan, that we've been thrown off course with some things because we don't have a strategic plan. Emergency funding for a county agency, funding for NAMI education. Those are things that have kind of swayed away from the Measure B language, and I think a strategic plan is absolutely needed for us to hone in on where our goals are and to actually put them in on paper. And transparency in everything that we do it's hard. When you look at meetings, agenda meetings where nothing is building on one another. Last month we were supposed to talk about Willits Hospital, and now it's not even anywhere to be found on this month's, and it just seems like it's haphazardly moving on whatever somebody feels. So I'm in total agreement that we need to place resources, and if we need to hire staff or consultants to get a strategic plan in place that we all can follow and resonate and build on. It's my opinion.
Thank you, Commissioner Myrtle. Commissioner Barish?
I would like to just offer another perspective, and that is that I don't think that the locked facility has been totally abandoned. I think that there has been a lot of work going on behind the scenes that has been very complicated and made more difficult by all kinds of regulatory concerns about which nobody knew about. I think we've considered at least 4 sites for the psychiatric facility, and either psychiatric health facility or psychiatric ward, which would be associated with a hospital. And, in fact, Adventist Health has spent $80,000 in vetting just what the Coast Hospital would look like in the unused space to use for a psych hospital. It became very complicated just because it was the question of how many beds would be needed in order to make it cost effective, and how many beds would be allowed in a critical access hospital, and then how far away from and whether you could have more beds if another facility were in charge of the beds rather than the critical access hospital. So we looked at Ukiah and found out that the regulation was that it had to be a mileage that would include Howard Hospital, but not the Coast Hospital. So, I mean, these are things that have been evolving, and I think they've been going in a fairly methodical fashion, although they haven't been on the Measure B agenda, simply because a lot was to be learned and evaluated before there was much of anything to talk about. And I think that has been proceeding without being actually talked about in the committee. And I think there's been a lot of work done and a lot of money spent, not of our committee money, but people looking at those issues. So I'm just saying, I take issue with people saying nothing's being done, because I don't agree.
Thank you, Commissioner Barish. Commissioner Diamond, please.
I want to thank Shannon for bringing this up, all of it. It's not as you say, not an easy recognition, but an absolutely vital one for moving ahead. I think that the two issues you described are vital, need to be addressed rapidly and as soon as we can, but need to be addressed well so that we move ahead. I actually would put them in the opposite order that you did. I think the structure needs to change in order to be able to get the strategic plan done. My experience has been, and this was from the beginning, having worked in mental health professionally for a long time, as soon as I was asked to join this board, my concern was having an 11-person board to make any kind of decisions, just the sheer number, 11. I went, God, I don't know if that's workable. 11 plus the people that were selected and the positions that were selected were varied, and some of the really powerful positions in the county. So not only do you have 11 of us, but part of the reason you got us is that we all have varied experience, we have varied backgrounds, and we have strong voices that advocate for various things. So I think we've been limited by the structure, and I'm really glad you're addressing that and saying we need to change the structure, because I don't think with the present structure, I think we're all going to stay somewhat frustrated, and the decisions that need to happen that really need to be decided are going to take more time. And I remember Sheriff Ahmed at the beginning saying that we had to be careful of two things. One was that we would have this body of money and we would spend it so fast without making the proper decisions and taking the time to make good decisions. The other was that we would talk forever and ever and not make decisions. And I think the structure makes both of those edges of concern that Tom Ahmed described much more likely to happen. All that being said, I really want to acknowledge, as Michelle did, that we really, in spite of the structure, which I think was unworkable in its form from the beginning, we've done quite well, and we've dealt with a whole lot of things. And the final thing that she acknowledged, I acknowledged in what I said, is that the fact that COVID hit not only affected everybody in the world and the county, but specifically many of the members of this group are being called on. I'm one, but there's many of the other members of this committee that are doing 2 or 3 times our regular jobs because of COVID. and haven't been able to bring the best of what we have to the decisions that we're doing. So all of that said, I don't know exactly how this is going to be created, because I don't have a clear enough feel for your recommendations, but clearly I believe it's probably the most important thing that we'll do immediately, because I think it will lay the foundation for a lot of future good decisions that the citizens have asked for in appointing us and giving the money out of their own pockets. Everybody has put in some money into this, everybody who pays taxes. And we deserve the best for what we're here for, which is to improve mental health services. So I'm really glad this is. I want to see it move ahead, and I hope the recommendations you've made can be put into form so that we actually can move this ahead as quickly as is possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Diamond. Commissioner Miller?
Yes, I just want to add a couple things. I do appreciate Shannon bringing this forward, and I'm hopeful that we can move it and make some additional changes that will be beneficial to the committee and the community at large. But I also want to just note that at the Behavioral Health Advisory Board, I think every month, just about, we talk about a psychiatric health facility, how we need one, how we're going to get one, what our locations, and how to reduce stigma and discrimination around putting a psychiatric health facility in a community, because we know it exists. And so I just want to note the mental health professionals have not lost sight of that at all. We did go with Kemper's recommendation that the CRT was number one, that the PUF has been the second thing on our agenda, and it has not left that agenda. And even just, I think we spoke about it today, and we've continued to talk at that meeting, and that's been that committee's goal for a long time, is to have that. And we've done a lot of conversations about how that committee can help reduce stigma and discrimination, and how do we get one of those facilities in Mendocino County, and how do we make it work. So I just want to note from the behavioral health experts' opinion and the stakeholders that are part of Behavioral Health and Advisory Board that it has not left our topic or agenda, and has been one of our number one focuses.
Thank you, Commissioner Miller. Do I have any other further commissioner comment? Yes, Commissioner Riley.
Actually, Ross has had his hand up for.
Oh, I'm sorry, I can't see it. I apologize
too. I'm not sure if she wanted to speak again, so I'll wait for both of them.
Okay, I'm sorry. Commissioner Liberty.
Hi, so thanks, Shannon. Thanks for pointing that out. At any rate, I actually will push back and say I want to contemplate, everybody to contemplate, well, how many clients have we helped at this point? If we're saying this system is not broken, how many clients have we helped? I can't point to a single one. We've taken money from the taxpayers for 3 years to the tune of about $24 million, haven't helped a single client. So to say that our system's working well, that's hard to imagine. The other point is that I agree with the need for a strong and central, what would you call it? Strategic plan. Strategic plan. I mean, I think that the ballot initiative, or whatever you call it, laid out what we were supposed to do. We came up with a mission statement that further defined this is what our job is as a committee. And really, the mission statement didn't say as much, but I think it really pointed towards a central strategic plan. In my world, it's PDCA, Plan, Do, Check, Act, right? First, you make a plan, and then you implement the plan, and then you look at the plan and evaluate it, and then act and change the plan as you need to, which maybe annually is enough for that. But I think that we really do need a plan. And I think 11 people, what you get with, what is it? A giraffe is a horse designed by a committee. When you have 11 people, you're going to come up with a giraffe. And so I have all these anecdotes from business stuff, right? So anyways, this is what private sector people talk about, just so you guys know. Anyways, so I think we need a strong strategic plan. It needs to not be developed by 11 folks. And I think it needs to be consistent with the voters' will and our mission statement. Else we'll be continuing, you know, it's the same old thing, right? If what is an insanity is defined as doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results, like, and to think that we've gotten good results so far, show me that client has been helped. So I would say we absolutely do need a strategic plan. I really think it's going to be a Herculean task to come up with one that gives due consideration to the costs. You know, the Kemper Report, this is a good example. So the Kemper Report, everybody says, well, the first thing they said was a CRT. Well, actually, the first thing they wanted was a CRT and a CSU. They're co-located at a facility on, and they recommended a facility on Orchard. Well, when you start getting into the nuts and bolts of it, the CSU doesn't pay. There's no other funding stream for it, and they're very expensive to operate. So that didn't happen. But you know, it's not. I don't want to pretend that we're following that strategic plan, because we're really not. There was discussion about whether or not 2 years ago, whether or not we needed to have a CEQA and a EIR to define a place that we're going to have the CSU or the CRT. Well, here we are 2 years later, and we don't have one yet. And they said at the time in the presentation made by Nash Gonzalez that it would be probably 90 days and we'd have a location defined. Well, none of us got to participate or look at the results of that study. We don't even know what happened. I feel like we're getting gaslighted all the time, and we're not really given the whole story. And I don't know if it's, I don't think it's malice. I think it's just maybe need to know, but we're trying to make decisions with a fourth of the information. And I think we could do better if we had a small group putting together a strategic plan that we could use as a guidepost. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Liberty. And I believe Commissioner Rich, you had something you wanted to say?
Yeah, at the appropriate time, I'd like to make a motion, but would want to make sure everyone's had a chance to weigh in on the discussion.
Okay, I believe, and I apologize to everyone, I cannot see when someone's hand is up if they are not on screen. So I believe Commissioner Riley has another statement, and then if anybody else does, please jump in after her, and then we need to go to community comment. Yes, Commissioner Riley.
Donna, just a question. Can you see the little yellow hands that appear?
I cannot.
Oh, okay, interesting. Well, that's probably good for people to know. Okay, I just wanted to address a couple of the comments. First and foremost, I believe that I said there's a perception that we have been squandering the tax money. If I did not say there's a perception of, that's what I meant to say. I think, and again, it just speaks to the absence of a transparent plan. Michelle indicated that a strategic plan should have an action plan associated with it. 150%. Yes, in my mind, it's not a plan if it doesn't have an action plan, timeline, and associated people who are responsible for implementing it with that plan. So absolutely, when I recommend a plan, that's an extremely critical part of it. And my reference to the Behavioral Health Advisory Board making recommendations was not a criticism, but rather a statement of how things are functioning. That is, in my opinion, not how this committee was intended to function. There has been no clear path of information. I remember having conversations with both of our project managers at times and they stated that they were unclear who they were supposed to be receiving direction from. It's this flow of information that has been very confusing for the public, for the committee members, for staff. And I believe that Behavioral Health Advisory Board and mental health staff are the people who should be making the recommendations in many of these cases. It is definitely not my area of expertise. That's not my role on this committee. I'm also glad to hear from ACE and Dr. Miller that discussions regarding the PUF are taking place. They've not been taking place at this committee and not in a transparent manner. So again, thrilled that that work is taking place, and under my recommendation, providing that was a prioritized project in the approved strategic plan, that work should carry on. And my idea is that funneling everything like that through this committee as it's happening now is not the most efficient way to accomplish these goals. Yes, concerned about overburdening behavioral health staff. That's really who's doing the work already. And I think although we have asked for transparency in the financial reports about who's being paid and how much, it's not that we aren't willing to pay people to do the work. It's just that we haven't been able to get clear answers to how those decisions are being made. So again, assuming that all of these things are laid out clearly in the strategic plan, which has an action plan and a timeline and a financial plan, then that work should be carried out by the experts that we already have and our very competent Behavioral Health Advisory Board and mental health staff. Anyway, I think that's mostly what I wanted to say. I didn't intend to imply that no work had been completed. My criticism is simply that we are not doing it in a transparent and clear way because we're not following a plan, in spite of the fact that we have a report that most people agreed was a good one. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Riley. If someone else has their hand up, please let me know.
Donna, Donna, can I clarify one thing? As we move forward, it is based on the minutes I read from September when the Kemper Ad Hoc Committee brought forward the request to hire a fiscal analyst or an expert to come in and write the business plan. It was not voted to do that. It was the vote from that motion, and I know because the Kemper Ad Hoc brought it forward, was to have the Kemper Ad Hoc work with the program manager to write that strategic plan, and it was something both the Kemper Ad Hoc and the Measure B Ad Hoc from the Board of Supervisors brought as a recommendation, and then we as a committee did not vote to move that forward, and that was in the September minutes. And then October, Allison brought that strategic plan back. So I just want to make sure as we move forward, if we move forward with this plan, we're clear on what we're voting on. Who's going to write it? If we are wanting a financial consultant, that's included in the motion, because it's not in the September minutes. I actually went back and verified that. So,
thank you, Commissioner Miller. Anyone else from the committee? Seeing none, and Lily, we don't have anyone from the committee that has their hand up?
No.
Thank you. Community comment, please.
We have Sherry.
Sherry, please go ahead.
I just wanted to point out that on page 45 of the Kemper Report, there is a proposed Measure B strategic financing plan, years 1 through 5, and the bottom half is years 6 through 10. And it's all laid out. And the strategy part, the strategic part, as I understand it, are all the things in that first column: a CRT, a PUF, a CSU, support services, and so on. And the thing that differs from what they've done from the way I've thought about this is they have lump sum dollar amounts for each of these by year. So, a CRT, 4.75 million in year 1, nothing after that. But there's no breakdown. There's no detail. So I'm not sure what the committee is looking for, whether they want that detail or just a lump sum number like this, which is already done in the Kemper Report. And again, and I know I'm repeating myself, but I don't see how a strategic plan can list all the possibilities, but without knowing the associated costs, because how do you prioritize? if you think, oh no, we shouldn't have a X, we shouldn't do X program, well, maybe in the broad context, when you look at the money that's still left over, or if we don't do Y, then we could do X. Maybe X is more important. But it's the spider web idea I always think of as everything being so interconnected. I heard someone say, yeah, we shouldn't do a CSU. It doesn't pay for itself. But their Measure B funding goes beyond 5 years. After 5 years, it drops. But the Measure B funding may then drop to $2 million. So what's the plan for those ongoing costs that can still be paid for with that projected $2 million? That needs to be part of the picture. So I guess as I've heard all the discussion, as I sit here, I'm feeling a little leery about creating a strategic plan when Kemper has gone and really produced a marvelous report with background into all of these different programs and facilities, and even laid out a financial plan to support it. So, and again, I don't know how much detail the committee is looking for in a financial plan, but there can certainly be more than the Kemper report provided. And I'll just throw this out.
Sherry, I'm sorry, can you wrap it up real quick?
Yes, yeah. In my first attempt at a financial plan, it included essentially everything that the Kemper report recommended, along with programs that the Board of Supervisors already approved, and it still shows there's about $7 million left over. So that's enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. Do I have another community comment, Lily?
Yes, Joe Bradley.
Joe, please go ahead. Joe, are you there?
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now, Joe.
Thank you. This was a little confusing from this end. What I've been listening to, I've been coming to these meetings since almost the beginning, and I am thrilled that Michelle said what she said, because I am now on the Behavioral Health Board, and we have been discussing this, and there has been progress. I am sure sitting on that committee, it feels very bogged down. At the beginning, you guys didn't have a rudder and you were going in circles, and now we've got COVID. However, I sat for years on the Tourism Commission on one part or another. I sat on those boards for 18 years. And we started with nothing, just like Measure B has started with nothing. And then all of a sudden we had all this money, and we had a community watching what we were doing and saying, you're not doing it right, and you're not doing it this way, you're not doing that way. We hired a company to help us do a strategic plan. And I don't know if they just specialize in tourism or if there's other companies. We found one that was amazing. And what it took was an extra meeting. I know you guys love that, but it took an extra meeting. And not only did we take the whole board, which was an 11-member board, we took the whole board and we asked people from outside that were interested in it or had a lodging, in this case, if there was somebody, like maybe have the BHAB board work with you, and to get everybody together and go through a one-day exercise to find out, and that would include the Kemper Report, find out what we're all seeing, what we're needing, where we feel we're being bogged down. And that company put together a strategic plan. And they actually, the last time, made us mats that we had on the table, and we could see what it was we were working toward at all times, not just have it in our heads, because all of you guys have, your hands full right now. Not only just doing what you do anyway, but now with COVID. And it was worth the outlay of money. And we did it a couple of times over a 10-year period just to reassess where we were going. And I know we're spending money and we're supposed to spend it on different, but right now you guys all feel like you're spinning your wheels. And I understand that, but that was some of the best money we spent because it gave us the ship and the rudder and the sails. And
Thank you, Joe. Can you sum up real quick, please?
Yep, that's it. I just think we need to do that. And I also want you guys to know, I really appreciate the time you're doing. And yeah, you have accomplished a few things. Thanks.
Thank you, Joe. Lily, is there any other community comment?
Yes, Supervisor John Haschak.
Supervisor Haschak, please.
Hi, good afternoon. This is a great discussion, and I just wanted to say that, since I'm on the Measure B Oversight Ad Hoc Committee from the Board of Supervisors, what we've been asking for is really the financials and a financial plan. I think that we've had real problems getting real financials that paint the picture so that everyone is clear on where we are with all the money. And I think that that's just like Sherry Ebium pointed out earlier, there's $108,000 Knockton Lewis charge that looks like it's a PUF charge, but it's in the CRT, and so when we get information like that, which seems like we've been getting that for a long time, it's really hard to make those long-term decisions. That being said, the ad hoc committee is working with the City of Willits Council ad hoc that they formed, and we're looking at the old Howard Hospital as a potential PUF site. And so we had one meeting already. We're having another meeting with the Rotary tomorrow in Willits, and we have a March 7th town hall meeting coming up. So that's all to say that that's part of this process and I wanted to be transparent about what's going on with this, the PUF investigation. So we are looking at that. I've been working with Sherry Ebium and her view of the financials, and it looks like, we will have money to build a PUF, but we are going to have to make decisions certainly along the way about how big, all those kind of decisions to stay within budget. But I guess the point is, don't be so hard on yourselves because, we have a CRT that's being built. We have a training center that's ready to go. We have, the programs. We have the mobile ops program. We have the aftercare program. We have the community education program that we've all approved. And so what we're looking at is the PUF and how to make that work at this point. And a real good financial plan would be very helpful, I think. So thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Haschak. I have two hands up and I'm not sure who was first. So Dr. Barish, please.
So I would like to support what Sherry and John said. One thing I would like to mention, I've been very impressed. I mean, part of the problem with the PUF is what's going to go on after the 5 years is up and how much it's going to cost to fund this PUF. And from that, you have to work backward to decide how many beds and what all of the expenses are. And this is the $80,000 I referred to Adventist Health hired this company to do just that, to decide how much could be charged for each bed and how much it would cost to fund them. And I was just very impressed with how terribly complicated that was. And just to decide what this PUF is going to look like and where it's going to be on the basis of whether we can afford to support it as time goes by. How much, and I think we could easily spend all of the money that we've allocated and quite a bit more, but I don't think it's an easy calculation. That's all I'm saying. And we could have a strategic plan, but I think that it does take expert evaluation. That's all.
Thank you, Commissioner Barish. And Commissioner Rich, before I get to you, I understand Supervisor Williams, you would like to speak?
Yeah, I want to voice support for everything Shannon Riley stated. I think, she points to a direction that would put us on a clear trajectory that's in line with public expectations. There's no shame here. The financing model for mental health services is extremely complex. I think if this group could put together a financial plan, it would have already been done. I couldn't sit down and put one together without working with staff that has intimate knowledge of funding, reimbursement rates, where the state is headed, because we can't just target what we have in front of us today, but we have to look at least 5 years out what funds we believe will still be available. And so I think it is appropriate to rely on expert staff to put together a plan based on finances. So Shannon, thank you for speaking up. I think what you said is solid.
Thank you, Supervisor Williams. Commissioner Rich.
Is it okay if I make a motion?
Shannon, would you prefer to put a motion aboard? This is your item.
It is my item, but it's, please go ahead, Michelle.
Okay, Michelle.
So I would like to, I'm making a motion to hire a consultant to facilitate a strategic plan process, which will include a comprehensive 5-year strategic plan with an action plan and timeline, along with detailed financial plans. And the financial plans are to be prepared by an appropriate financial analyst. And this strategic plan will be used as the performance management strategy that is mentioned explicitly in the Mental Health Treatment Act ordinance.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Commissioner Riley. So we have a first and a second. Any other committee comment, please? Do I have any, Lily? Oh, yes, Commissioner Diamond.
Yeah, before we discuss this part, Shannon, I just wanted to be sure your presentation had 2 parts. One was the plan, and then the other was a restructuring. I thought both of those were important, and I'm wondering, are you going to split your potential motion into 2? I see you nodding. Okay.
2 separate motions. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
You, Mr. Diamond.
Lily, does anyone else from the committee wish to speak?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, any community?
Yeah, I would like to speak, sorry.
Okay, yes, sorry, that's okay, Mark, please.
Yep. So Sherry made a good point. I think we have a Kemper report that offers us a lot of good information. It's 3 years old. We have a sample financial plan that was submitted to us for a rough draft. I think we need somebody to assimilate it. If we try to go out for an RFP for a consultant, we could be pushing this down the road 6 months at least. It takes 3 months to draft the RFP. So that's my input.
Thank you, Commissioner Myrtle. Any further comment from the committee? Yes, Commissioner Riley.
I'd like to ask Member Rich if she might be willing to modify the motion, which I think was very articulate, but to ensure that the strategic plan is based on the Kemper report.
Yes.
Thank you. And again, I guess I just want to state personally that as much as I hate the idea of having to hire a consultant for this, I do see value in it, in that we've been asking for this for literally years now and have somehow been unable to accomplish it on our own. I still think the May timeline is reasonable that I originally proposed, given the fact that, as Sherry and some of our other committee members have stated, we have the plan probably 75% done in the Kemper report. But what we need is for someone to help us put that in a structure that has all of the pieces that Member Rich identified, the specific action plan, perhaps some more detailed financials to satisfy the supervisor's needs, and the things that Sherry was asking for. So yes, if my assumption, and if the motion is modified to reflect that it is based primarily on the Kemper report, then I would second that amendment.
Yes, I would.
So, Commissioner Rich, could you please restate your motion with the amendment?
So I move to hire a consultant to facilitate a strategic plan process based on the Kemper report, which will include a comprehensive 5-year strategic plan with action plan and timeline, as well as a financial plan to be prepared by an appropriate financial analyst. And this document will be used as the performance management strategy pursuant to the Mental Health Treatment Act ordinance.
Is that okay for a second from you, Commissioner Riley?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Any further committee comment? Yes, Commissioner Diamond.
Just real quick, I wonder if the hiring a consultant to do that could be done within our existing structure rather than having to send out an RFP and do a long process. Might we have somebody in the mental health system or within the system that could be charged with doing that and paid out of Measure B money to do that? Or does this require a more formal RFP, RFQ that would take time? I'm just asking.
I know the county has had people on staff to do facilitation type activities already. Maybe it could fit, and maybe the county attorney could weigh in on this. If there's existing contracts that this work could fit into. For example, I know Mari Roden recently facilitated the development of a strategic plan for homeless services.
If I may respond through the chair, that may well be the case. I just don't know what contracts are out there and what they may not have terms for already. So it's possible there's something but I couldn't, without undertaking a review, I couldn't tell you what might be available.
Okay, I have one other public comment, and then we'll call for the vote. Public comment, please.
Sherry?
Yeah, this is Sherry. The only last thing I wanted to throw in is that the contract with Nocton Lewis is huge. And to see which of these components that have been talked about as being useful and essential to going forward, are any of those included in that Nocton Lewis contract already? Whether it be a timeline or an action plan, something related along those lines. So someone from the county acting as a liaison to work with Nocton Lewis to see what it is that they actually can offer that might fit into this discussion today. That's already in the contract.
Thank you, Sherry. Lily, will you please call for the vote?
Yes. Commissioner Allman?
He's absent. He had to leave.
Commissioner Angelo?
She lost reception. I think she had to leave too.
Commissioner Barish?
Yes.
Commissioner Diamond?
Yes.
Commissioner Myrtle?
Yes.
Commissioner Miller?
Yes.
Commissioner Liberty?
Yes.
Commissioner Rich?
Yes.
Commissioner Riley,
Yes.
Commissioner Weir,
Yes.
and Chair Moscotti.
Yes. Great. Now we will move on to part two. Part two, Shannon, please.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion that we create an ad hoc committee specifically to discuss the possible restructure of the Measure B committee. I would like that ad hoc committee to work with the Board of Supervisors Measure B Oversight Committee. I would be willing to serve on that committee, but it's not necessary. So,
Okay. Do I have a second on that, please?
I second it.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Committee comment, please. I can't see if anybody's hands up.
This is Commissioner Rich.
Yes, please.
I think it is good to assess the structure, especially at this juncture out from the initiation of the committee. But I was under the impression that the number and constitution of the committee was actually written in the ordinance that was passed. So I don't know that there's a lot of flexibility in numbers or things like that. So that would just be my concern.
Shannon, would you like to answer to that, please?
yeah, if I may clarify, you're absolutely right. We cannot change the number or the composition of the committee. My recommendation is to change the function of this committee so that rather than this committee engaging in conversations about lighting and landscape contracts, we leave that to the mental health professionals and experts. And instead, this committee acts more as an oversight committee performing reconciliation of the independent financial audit and making sure that the work that's being performed is consistent with the accepted strategic plan. And so that my recommendation is that this committee would meet more informally and strictly provide kind of an objective set of eyes on the work that's being done.
Does that answer your question, Commissioner Rich?
Yes, thank you.
Do I have further comment, please? Lily, do I have any hands up for the committee?
No,
Do I have any community comment?
no community comment.
Okay, Lily, will you call for the vote, please?
Commissioner Barish,
Yes.
Commissioner Diamond,
Yes.
Commissioner Myrtle,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller,
Yes.
Commissioner Liberty,
Yep.
Commissioner Rich,
Yes.
Commissioner Riley,
Yes.
Commissioner Weir,
Yes.
and Chair Moscotti.
Yes. Now, in addendum to that, we need to figure out an ad hoc. And we might as well do it now. We have 25 minutes left to this meeting. We have one more update from behavioral health, the Kemper Report on what's happening with the CRT, et cetera. So I can definitely appoint, but I would actually like to have people who are interested in being on this.
So I'll volunteer.
Okay. Is there anyone else? I'm there by default if no one else goes.
I think Tom Allman should be on it since he was a proponent of getting this measure passed, and I think it would be.
I will run it by him. I'll send him an email later. Mark?
Okay.
I think that's how it works. If you're not at the meeting, you get
You
assigned.
get.
I
if
agree.
not at the meeting, you're done. It's too bad. Too bad, so sad. Is there anybody else? And we can also add a fourth at a later moment. I can send out email if anybody has any recommendations or anything to that effect. Right now we have myself, Shannon, and I will send out an email to Tom later this afternoon asking him, is there anyone else?
Just as the maker of this motion and this recommendation, I'd like to say that I do not intend this work to be long and drug out. I think this is a couple of meetings and discussions with a recommendation back to this committee. So it's hopefully short and sweet.
Okay. If anyone else would like to join this committee, please feel free to email me. All right, thank you very much. We are on to item, sorry, I wrote on all my paperwork. I believe it's 3E, yes? I apologize. And that is the Kemper Report update. Commissioner Miller, please.
I'm assuming this is on the CRT, Donna?
Correct.
All right. So I have today Karen Lovato, who has been working on the CRT, Crisis Residential Treatment Facility, and she's going to present and give you guys an update on what is the progress and where we're at. She also has some pictures that she'll be sharing. And then we also attached to this item, there was a monthly report as a draft that we've been working with the construction company on, and the project manager for construction, and any feedback on that report will be used to go to the board and in addition to this committee at future meetings.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Karen Lovato, Acting Senior Program Manager with Behavioral Health and Recovery Services. And as a brief report, I'm going to go ahead and give the verbal report. Lily, I think I need permission to share my screen, if you can give me that as well.
You should be able to now, Karen.
Now I'm back. So just as a brief report, we are on track with our CHAFA status for the $500,000 grant. We're in compliance with our milestones there. We have made some design changes for the 90% drawings to reduce the impact on long-term maintenance and repair, reducing things like skylights and windows, things that would impact structure and potentially be broken and need repair. The visual that I have to share is that we have broken ground this week. And so I have some pictures that I would like to share. Just 1 second. I can get to the right. There we go. So we have some pictures of having broken ground. The project sign and fencing have been in place for some time, but this week the excavator began removing vegetation, creating a construction entrance, ripping the soil to air out and dry the soil, digging up and moving dirt, and beginning to put in runoff controls. So those are some of our visuals around breaking ground. Our operator contract is in the process of being finalized and scheduled to go before Board of Supervisors for approval. And I did want to note, because I heard a question earlier about CEQA processes, the crisis residential treatment process did go through CEQA processes. Those were completed. The mitigated negative declaration did go before the Board of Supervisors in September of 2020, and again in December of 2020, to expand the work hours and allow to ensure that we meet our construction milestone goal of open and operational in November. That is my report. Any questions?
Please, committee questions.
Janine, I'm going to defer to you. I don't know that I can share that until it is approved by the Board of Supervisors.
Approve it until the contract is approved by the selected operator. We have a negotiated rate. We're writing the contract now. So as long as they're willing to go forward, and the board will share it as soon as we know we definitely have a negotiated rate that they're going to stick to in our agreement with the contract. So we should have that for you, Mark, by next meeting.
All right, thank you.
I do want to note that at this point, so that I know the committee has asked, at this point, there will be no cost to Measure B for the operations of the CRT. Those will be able to be reimbursed through realignment and Medi-Cal billing, and then any private insurance billing. And there's also negotiations potentially with Lake County to do also use that facility, which will help Mendocino County with the cost. There will obviously be cost for the committee to consider on the regular maintenance of the facility. the main capital parts of the facility. The provider is willing to do the regular repairs and landscaping maintenance to reduce that cost on the county and Measure B. So we'll provide you hopefully more information next month.
Thank you, Commissioner Miller. Do I have any further? Yes, Commissioner Riley, please.
Sorry, I don't know if this is kind of a general update, but I still haven't heard the results of the RFP for the operation of the PUF that closed at the end of November. Can we get an update on that?
Doctor?
So I don't have anything to add on that, Shannon, yet. I am hopeful that at the next Measure B meeting, we'll have more information to provide to you regarding that, the operator of the PUF.
Why don't we have information 4 months later?
It actually closed later than expected, and then it had to go through the basic review to make sure the RFPs met compliance of the standards, and the committee is still evaluating that, the results of those proposals that were submitted.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other further questions about the CRT? Lily, do I have any community comment?
Yes. Sherry?
Yes, Sherry, go ahead.
I just have two questions, really. One is, I heard you say that you were going to reduce the windows and skylights. Is it can you tell me, was it a huge reduction, a tiny reduction, percentage-wise, what was reduced? Only because crisis residential treatment, I'm no expert, but I know windows are such a wonderful thing to let light in. I would think that'd be so therapeutic to people inside. But that's, again, I'm no expert. But I don't know if you can address how much reduction was actually done. And then the second thing is, I thought I heard you say that there would be no operational cost for this CRT. And the number that I had heard prior till today was roughly $500,000 of non-reimbursable costs annually. So all of a sudden that's gone from $500,000 down to zero. And I'm wondering, I just wonder about that. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. Do I have any further community comment?
Yes, Supervisor Haschak.
Please, Supervisor Haschak.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. My question was along the same lines as Sherry's second question about the projected 500,000 now going down to zero. So I think that that's very good news. I hope that that holds up with the vendor or the provider, and that's true.
Thank you, Supervisor Haschak. Do I have anything further, Lily? Community?
No.
Any further committee? No? Okay. Yes.
Donna, can I add one thing?
Yes.
I think it is, you know, I know we don't always answer committee comments back, but I would like to add, because I think it's not just the committee, not just we don't always answer the, you know, the attendees' comments, but I think the committee probably has questions too. And so I think I just do want to answer two of those. One is, there were the windows, I can't give you a percentage, but what I can say is there was glass entrance, glass doors, windows that were 8 feet wide, in bedrooms that were not in rooms that weren't realistic. When you have a crisis residential treatment facility, more glass is dangerous. You want less glass. You still want enough lighting. The windows are still there. They're still decent size, but we didn't want full glass entries where we're going to cause a hazard, or doors that were made out of glass instead of regular wood doors for safety of clients. So we had to do some relooking at what is the safety for the clients, but still providing that adequate light to give the clients the light they need. And so that was sort of the need to relook at the original design and revamp it to actually meet safety standards for the clients, but still provide that nice lighting that was needed. For example, we had a full glass entry door. The door was glass. There was glass all around the whole entry, which is a hazard for clients that could be in crisis and would definitely break through that door. So we had to relook at safety from the glass perspective, but still have windows and they're still adequate size. So that was that. In regards to the estimate on the crisis residential, if people remember, I said we wanted to put a buffer in there up to 500,000. If we needed, I think I've said multiple times that I was hopeful that we could operate these facilities with no to limited Measure B dollars going into them. But there's always been a lot of push that there's belief that we will need Measure B dollars. So we buffered it to say if we needed Measure B dollars, it would be up to about $500,000 in operating costs, depending on whether what the per day rate would be, how much reimbursement we could get from the state, what the state's negotiated bed day rate would be with the county. So there's a lot of things we have to look at. Part of that 500,000 is also the annual maintenance upkeep. So I'm not saying that Measure B will not have any dollars that go into upkeeping that facility. There will still be facility cost upkeep that will be part of Measure B. So some of that $500,000 will still exist. It will just not be needed at this point for operational cost.
Thank you, Commissioner Miller. Any further commissioner comment? Lily, would you please ask for commissioner reports, please? If they have anything to report.
Yes. Commissioner Barish,
Nothing to report.
Commissioner Diamond,
Nothing to report.
Commissioner Myrtle,
Nothing to report.
Commissioner Miller.
I'd just like to add two things. I know Supervisor Haschak noted that there will be a meeting on March 7th regarding the psychiatric health facility as option in Willits. I will be speaking at that from the behavioral health perspective about the need for a psychiatric health facility and just talking about what happens and how to reduce stigma around that. And then at the Rotary Club tomorrow, the Willits Rotary tomorrow, to also talk about what is the psychiatric health facility, who does it serve, and how to reduce stigma around that. Also wanted to add that we are updating the Measure B webpage for everyone to note. We have added a project page to that so you guys can see and updates where every project is and what's happening. It also has pictures of the CRT, and we put the cost, what's been approved cost-wise for those projects are also on that project page. We are also in the process of translating all of those into Spanish. So they will also be in English and Spanish so that our monolingual Spanish speakers can also have an update on what's happening in Measure B. That's all I have to add.
Commissioner Liberty,
Nothing to report.
Commissioner Rich,
Nothing to report.
Commissioner Riley,
No report.
Commissioner Weir,
Nothing to report. Thank you.
and Chair Moscatelli.
Nothing to report. Thank you, everyone, for your participation and for all the great ideas and for being part of this process. Thank you, and we'll see you next month.